I love a great story. For 25 years on The Oprah Show, I had the privilege of bringing some of the best stories to viewers all over the world. That's why when I started creating the OWN network, I felt that great stories would be our foundation. I call them real-life stories. The filmmaking artists who make these real-life stories, or documentaries, have transformed the way we see ourselves, each other, and the world, and they're driven by their passion to enlighten, elevate, and entertain us all. These films hit us to our core, and those are the stories I wanted to share with you. Here's one of the many brilliant real-life story documentary films that we brought to you on the OWN network.
Hey there, it's me, Rosie O'Donnell, and welcome to the OWN Documentary Club. Remember what Oprah did for books? She picked one and then everybody read it and it was like fantastic. She's doing the same for docs. Together we're going to see hand-picked films by Oprah, by the staff, by me, that explore all parts of life. We like to say they're real life, well told. Tonight's documentary is pretty amazing. It's called Most Valuable Players. If you're a movie star and you do the best, you get an Oscar. If you're on Broadway and you're the best, you get a Tony. Well, in Pennsylvania, they've made their own award system for high school musical theater students. It's called the Freddie Award. And these kids give their heart and soul to musical theaters. Their teachers and their school administrators all get together and they have it's a beautiful experience. I don't even know what to tell you about this documentary aside from the fact that I loved it and it made me cry at the end. I think you're going to enjoy it. Sit back, relax, and get ready. Here's the premiere of Most Valuable Players.
I'm Matthew Kalis, director, producer of Most Valuable Players.
I'm Christopher Lockhart, writer, producer of Most Valuable Players. And Matthew and I are going to take you on a 90-minute journey through the film as we comment on the documentary and our experiences making it.
This opening montage was actually the last thing we created for the film, and it expresses the way that sports and the arts are very similar and create many of the same experiences for students in school.
Yeah, originally we had the idea of showing the kids arriving at the Freddie Awards, and then we'd sort of flash back, but we opted with this more thematic montage.
We also thought it was important to really introduce people to this amazing area in Pennsylvania where the Freddies take place.
Yeah, and thanks to our Emmy Award-winning director of photography, Kurt Upduhan, we got some great shots. That's, I think, an Allentown cemetery, and now we sort of flash to the various schools. Emmaus, this is Parkland High School.
And to our great editor of the local paper, who introduces us to the way this community works, and it's a very sports-centric town, and how the arts somehow have found their own niche within this community.
Yeah, we actually stumbled upon Joe Owens because he has a blog, a very opinionated blog called Cup of Joe, and he's been very vocal about the Freddie Awards. This, of course, is Shelley Brown. She's the creator of the Freddie Awards, and she was so instrumental in just really bringing us into the fold. Although she was a little bit hesitant at first, Matthew.
Yeah, we had to sell her on the idea that we weren't coming in from Hollywood to do a hatchet job on the program and their community.
Yeah, so we actually flew in to the Lehigh Valley in January of 2008 to meet everybody and to really talk about what our intentions were. And she finally gave us the thumbs up, and about a month later we were ready to roll on in. This part of the film, it's really expository. We're just trying to lay out what the Freddie Awards are for people who have never heard of them, and then we can just sort of move on with the story.
And create a sense of just how big this is in this community and how amazing it is.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this award ceremony airs on live television, just like the Tony Awards do or the Oscars, it's really impressive. This particular year, the shot you're looking at, the show was aired in high definition, which was terrific, and of course was great for us because our movie was shot in HD. There's a lot of other footage that you'll see that was taken from WFMZ, the TV station that's in standard def.
In fact, one of the challenges for us was trying to find a way to take all the different kinds of material, standard def and high def, and bring it together in a way that felt seamless and cinematic in its presentation.
Right.
As hard as any of these other things, and it deserves the recognition. People always credit me with having the idea for the Freddies, but I really stole the idea.
So this shot here is standard def, and we discussed, do we want to present it full screen, and here we went with this sort of optical effect. What's that called, Matthew?
The TV screen vignette or template over the mask over the footage.
Right, and since it's coming from a TV show, we opted for this.
It also allowed us to make the standard def footage look cleaner because it didn't get blown up to the full size of the high definition format.
I never had any plans of being in theater.
Oh, these shots here. Shelley had these old shots from her news career.
And she certainly didn't want us using them.
No, she didn't want to give them to us. They were like in her basement. And I was like, Shelley, we really want those. And she was like, look, this isn't a movie about me. It's a movie about the kids. But I said, listen, just give us the footage and we'll use it in a way that's appropriate.
And here you can see the way in which Shelley does her job in so many different capacities and is such a big part of the community in what she does and how she works.
Yeah, and at this point, there are quite a few High School Musical Theater award ceremonies around the country, but the Freddie Awards is the only one that's televised live. And that's what she's talking about right now. And again, this is more of their HD footage that was aired live that year. I mean, it's really spectacular. Of course, we shot it in 2008, and WFMZ chose not to produce the live TV show in HD, which really sort of was very disappointing for us.
But the one thing they were able to do for us at our request was to at least do the standard footage in the 16:9 proportion so that when we did mix some of it in, we had more flexibility to make it look more consistent with the HD footage.
That's right. The scholarships now, I think the Freddie Awards is up to probably $150,000, $160,000 worth of scholarships. It's twice what she quotes in this movie from 2008. That's a 1,300 seat theater?
Actually, I think it's more like 1,600 seats.
1,600 seats?
Yeah, and it's absolutely amazing how the theaters filled over capacity every year. I mean, people are clamoring for tickets that are unavailable.
Now, this is our introduction to Vic Kuma. I remember when Shelley said, Vic Kuma is going to be your liaison. I thought Vic Kuma, like, hey, I'm Vic Kuma, you know, like I'm some Jersey Shore kind of guy. But he cuts a completely different look. I think Kuma is Russian.
I will say that the one thing about Vic was that he was this amazing person that this is the first time we met him when you see him singing here on the stage, and I had this great feeling like I'd known him forever.
Yeah, that was actually the very first interview that we did, this one right here, the very first sit-down interview that we did with anybody, and Vic was terrific. And it was actually at the end of this interview where he told us that he was going to see the doctor because he hadn't been feeling well. And now we're at Freedom High School, and you get to hear the voice of the wonderful Tasha. Now, just for the record, she spells it Tasha, but she says it Tasha. There she is. And when we actually went to Freedom High School for the first time, do you remember? The kids rushed out at us.
It felt like we were like homecoming heroes or something. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, they were very comfortable and very natural around the camera, which was great. But I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Jen is the teacher. Now, if you look in Jennifer's book that she's holding in her hands, you can see she's got the Cliff Notes. Look,
yes.
The teacher's allowed to use Jen, you're using Cliff Notes. Uh-oh, did I just blow something wide?
You just gave something away.
All right.
Of course, we know that she was a basketball coach, and I love how she uses that in the classroom as well.
We primarily used 2 cameras through the shoot. Kurt Uptahan was our A camera, and Matthew was our B camera, and this is Matthew shooting this on the B camera. Can you just very quickly, Matthew, talk about the 2 different cameras that were used?
Well, they were very different, but what we tried to do is, first of all, find equipment that would be extremely reliable, and we went with a tape-based format so that we wouldn't have any concerns about the footage getting lost in the process of electronic transfer. And we went with actually older technology for both the fact that we had such limited budget and also because we wanted that extra sense of reliability.
And now here's the introduction to John Andreatis.
It was so incredible to get people that sort of were in some ways the stereotypes that you want to follow. Just like in Glee, John was a sports star who became enamored of the theater because he was inspired by his teacher, Jennifer Wesco. And he even talked about later about how he didn't have the easiest time with his teammates until they finally came and saw him perform, and that really helped them to get it and be supportive of him.
However, though, our DP, Kurt, would always say, soccer's not a real sport. We just had a lot of fun being at these rehearsals and just watching these kids do their thing. I did high school theater, which was part of my inspiration for Most Valuable Players. And
even I was on I was in the high school stage crew, and that still was being part of this team and this family.
And they were the same people. Like, I can look back on my high school days, and, we had a John, we had an Amanda, we had all of those kids. It's, the archetypes don't change over the years, only the faces do, and I think that's why people who did musical theater really enjoy the movie. And the movie's been seen all over the world, along with, of course, having premiered on OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. Amanda's really so quiet and sweet. She's a powerhouse on stage, but in the real world, she's very quiet, and so it made cutting these interviews a little bit difficult because she was occasionally lower energy, and we really wanted to sort of make sure that she came across with a more powerful presence.
Interesting here, this is a parody of a song from Bye Bye Birdie, and we had to get special permission to use it because Conrad was replaced with Amanda in the singing of the song.
Yeah, I think people just assume that we can use any of the music we want and throw it into the movie and it doesn't cost us any money. It cost a lot of money to put these songs in. In fact, when we premiered in Los Angeles, I got an email from a drama teacher who said, "Why isn't there more singing and music in this film?" And I wrote him back and I said, because it would cost us $300,000-$400,000 extra to put all of this music in. It's really costly.
I also love when they were playing that game earlier, the slapping game, and the first time I showed the clip to my kids, they said, "I can't believe they play that game there, too." And here in California, the kids played it as well.
I can't believe anybody plays it. It was the sadomasochistic game, that's what I called it.
And then all of these incredibly fun and silly exercises, and how much the kids were into it. I mean, I love in this scene, when you see in this next scene Zach, I mean, he is so up for it. It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, it made for a great scene. There's Zach
There
in
he
red,
is.
jumping up and down. Don't know if he's doing it for us or if that's the real Zach, but he was very energetic throughout the shooting of this. What's interesting, though, is that when the film premiered and Zach saw it in his hometown, he was a little standoffish about it. Although he liked the movie, he didn't quite like the way he was portrayed in the film, not holding us accountable, but just that he was uncomfortable with who he was as a high school student. But he's come to grips with that now. He's a great kid. He goes, I think, to George Washington University.
Yeah. And now we get to meet the great rivalry between these two schools, Emmaus and Parkland, rivals in everything and now in musical theater. And it was such a serendipitous thing that the year we came, they had chosen to do the same play on the same weekend.
Right, and it's and other schools have done the same play the same year, so it wasn't anything particularly new. But these schools are real crosstown rivals. I love the battling signs. That's what we call that.
Yep.
Because it was just sort of a fun visual way to set up the conflict between these two schools. And now we're meeting the various teachers. This is Rita Cortez. We'll talk more about her a little later because she was a character and deserves her very own documentary. Of course, Mark Stutz gets booed and hissed at most of the screenings.
And I always tell people, hey, if he was captain of the football team, would you think he was so over the top in his support and cheerleading?
Yeah.
Of the
He's,
kids?
in fact, Mark was the very first teacher that I spoke to. He had not returned my calls right away, and I was in the middle of a Lamaze class, and the phone rang, and I had to dart out to finally talk to him.
So not only did we have to convince Shelley Brown, who had created the Freddies, to let us in, but we had to convince the schools and the local communities to let us in. And we had a number of scary moments in which they were quite wary of us, and we had to find a way to gain their trust.
Yeah, there was one parent from Emmaus High School who didn't like the release forms. He thought that we would sort of enslave the children, and he was a lawyer, so he started a whole sort of mishigash and a rally to try to prevent us from coming into Emmaus High School.
Yeah, we were at that point we were scared that it would be like a contagion that would spread and that the schools would shut down. But we were able to convince him and find also people like Jen, who opened up to us and who told the kids, hey, if you participate openly in this, this could be like the best high school yearbook you ever had for your senior year.
Yeah, Jennifer Westco's attitude was really terrific for us, and that was really instrumental in us sort of putting that school at the center of this film, because we had spent a lot of time with them. Making a documentary is always about access. You have to have access to your subject matter. If I can just point out that I'm right there, I'm sort of to the right side of the screen.
Early on, because of the fact that we had multiple cameras and we are shooting in a cinema verite style, that we had to accept the idea that we might end up in the frame here too, like Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, we're constantly sort of crossing into the frame and trying to avoid each other. And that made the editing process a little bit difficult. So now Rita Cortez is the choral director, as it's already been established. And she was terrific in the sense that, well, first off, I should say that she was sort of put into an odd position because Jill Keebler, the drama teacher, was pregnant. And so she eventually had her child and went off on leave. So Rita was sort of left with having to deal with us, and she really wanted nothing to do with the documentary. She certainly didn't want to be in it. But I don't think that she wanted to deny the students. So she was really conflicted. I remember the very first night that we shot afterward, I went up to her and I said, Ms. Cortez, thank you very much. And she snapped at me. And she said, don't be sarcastic. And I was like, I'm not being sarcastic. Thank you.
You just met Kate and Allie, who we were thrilled to get because they're very much like the Greek chorus in the film. And when we originally interviewed them individually. But when we saw them together, our DP Kurt said, oh my God, we have to get the two of them together on camera. And boy, they fed off each other and made
they were great separate, but there was a lack of a spark. Or at least not the spark that they have together, because they really bounced off each other, and it was terrific. And our original idea was to do a Greek chorus, and we were not just going to use Katie and Allie. We were going to use Laura Melchior, a student from Allentown Central Catholic. We were going to use Todd Lewis, a student from Blair Academy, and they were going to comment on events. But these two girls just sort of, they were able to carry it through themselves, and I refer to them as our dressing room divas.
And I think one of the things that is difficult in a film like this is, as it is, there are a lot of kids and a lot of teachers and Freddie volunteers to keep track of. And so we had to find a way to have fewer people so that there wouldn't be confusion about what was going on.
Yeah, there were a lot of disappointed schools afterward wanting to know why they weren't part of the film, why we chose to only focus on 3 schools rather than 8 schools. Because if we focused on 8 schools, the movie would have been 20 hours long, and you wouldn't have been able to have followed it all. And believe me, some of our critics felt that this was a little bit difficult to follow. This was a house that was right adjacent to the hotel that we stayed in, and Kurt would get up very early in the morning and take those shots. And this was one of my favorite shots coming up here, the woman with the furry slippers. I would fight to keep that in. You guys would always take it out, and I would say, "Where's the furry slipper lady?"
And I think what it reflects is how this community, which was once very affluent, is now very working class and struggling, and yet somehow Shelley and the community participants in the schools have found a way to make the arts so important in spite of the struggles that have been going on in this community.
However, though, this scene, she talks about the struggles of her theater, and she's at WAEB, and we shot this one early morning. Do you know that DJ, Bobby Gunther, I heard that he didn't like the movie that much. Did you know that?
Yeah, he was disappointed, probably because he's only in this one scene.
Well, I don't know about that. But, look, you can't please everybody all the time. But this was a little bit of a challenge to edit from what I can recall. And the question was, did we want to put in this information? Did we want to sort of stop the momentum of the film to talk about the trials and tribulations of the State Theater? And we felt that it was important because this is a movie about the arts in general, and this is probably stereotypical of many of these sorts of theaters around the country. So
and what Shelley has to do to keep it the message going out into the community, to keep the support going, is she's got to be constantly doing things like this radio interview.
And because of her broadcast experience, she's a terrific spokesperson. She certainly lightens up this film, because could you imagine if we had another person in Shelley's place who was not as articulate and as attractive? And she's just awesome in this, and everybody who sees it is like, oh, you're so lucky to have that woman.
And another character in the film we also felt was the theater itself, this incredible grande dame of a theater where the Freddies take place.
And Fred the Ghost. And we wanted to discuss Fred the Ghost because to me that was such a wonderful, quirky little detail. And that man that you see is not really Fred the Ghost. That's a former manager of the theater. What was his name again?
Ken Klabundi.
Ken Klabundi,
who actually
that's
is one of the
correct.
few people who's still alive that knew Fred when he was alive.
And we actually did a very long interview with Ken discussing the history of the theater and Fred, and we had some shots of him sort of, glancing out at the theater, and so we decided to sort of make him be Fred the Ghost. I think it's kind of appropriate. It's a special effects shot there with the clock.
And what was great was while we were shooting the film, we even had a situation where the Pennsylvania Paranormal Society showed up.
Oh, that's right,
And
the
there was
Ghostbusters.
The Ghostbusters, and they did an overnight, and we participated, and that was
We actually
great
spent
fun.
the night in the theater.
Yep.
And they did all these crazy tests, and we got a lot of great, hilarious footage. And they found it in the end that there was paranormal activity in the theater. They couldn't say that it was Fred the Ghost, but they did believe there was paranormal activity in the theater. And now we're in Bethlehem. It's not Bethlehem, it's Bethlehem.
Yes.
Yes, it's a big difference. And we're at the home of the Andreatis family, an amazing Greek family.
Who really didn't understand when we came that we were here to do the interview. So when we arrived, they had a huge spread of food, and they wanted us to sit down and enjoy the meal with them, and which of course we took some time to do.
We did, and that's George, Kelsey, and Karen. It was really a fun night, and George was so proud of his son. But I love this moment here when he's sort of talking about, we get a glimpse of the prejudices about the arts, the idea that John is manly and he's dancing like a sissy is the word that he used, and I love that word. And so it's interesting to see how the dad, how he sort of comes to grips with it, and that he loves it because his son loves it, and he can be proud of his son doing it, which this next little bit shows when he's painting John's shoes here. And he was so proud of this.
And this has really become, again, another great character. When we're making the film, when we saw these gold shoes, it became something to follow through to the end so that you could then see how they had their place and their moment in the final scene when they're on the stage at the Freddy's performing their number for the television audience.
This is actually one of my most favorite scenes in the movie. I love him painting.
This is
the gold
Zach's
shoes.
birthday party that we attended, and
This is now. If I'm correct, if you saw the movie premiere on the Oprah Winfrey Network, you didn't see this scene because we had to take out about 8 minutes just so it could fit the time slot. So you're seeing this scene for the first time, and it was hard to determine which scenes we had to cut, and because this sort of spoke to why kids do theater. And Zach's talking about how maybe he didn't quite fit in, and yet he found these kids, and that he speaks to that camaraderie. And so I thought that was important, but alas.
Now here is a scene that was actually shot using what we called the kid cams, because we weren't around so often. We could only come for brief periods throughout the time that Freddy season occurred.
Yeah, and we couldn't be at every school all at once.
Exactly. So we gave kids high-def cameras, and they would shoot footage and send it back to us. And I was always concerned when I'd stick a new tape in the machine that there might be something that wasn't okay on one of them. But they were great, and they gave us some great material to add to the film as in terms of their experiences and from their perspective.
And a few kids like Laura Melchior from Allentown Central Catholic, she was a very integral part of the film when we first started it, but eventually the story took shape and she ended up not being included, but she had shot hours and hours and hours of great footage on her kid cam. And it was a shame that we couldn't use it. Now we're back at Emmaus High School, and with Katie and Allie. It's kind of funny because if you remember, there was that TV show in the 80s with Jane Curtin and Susan St. James called Kate
Absolutely.
and Allie.
It was a hilarious show.
It was on for probably 5 years.
And I think that this also gives you an insight into sort of a different kind of a theater kid, and how even when you're part of that family, there can be conflict, because Katie and Allie felt like at times they weren't accepted by the other kids, and maybe it's because of their brutal and hilarious honesty that you can see on camera here that they sometimes got in trouble with their classmates. But we found them refreshing and insightful.
Well, because they sounded like real students. The thing about interviewing a lot of these kids is I think that people just in general today, because of reality TV, are much savvier, and so they're becoming more media conscious, and they're not.
They're guarded.
They're guarded, exactly right. And Katie and Allie weren't guarded in their interviews, and they really just let loose. And so, to me, that was so vital to this, because it sort of counterbalanced the sort of sweetness and light that we get from the Freedom High School kids.
Yeah.
Now, these girls are truly the very, very best of friends, but there's also a little bit of rivalry between them, which was always so amusing. They loved each other like sisters, like wives, but there's that rivalry between best friends. You know, who's the better singer, who gets more applause.
Even boyfriends, they had to pick different kinds of kids to have for boyfriends so they wouldn't be competing for the same
But they
boys.
actually did date the same guy.
That's right. They
Yes.
did it. They did it.
All right, we're gossiping.
Oh, well.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the disparity between sports and the arts in terms of budget, because we know that sports tends to get more money than the arts does, and in this case, Jennifer doesn't get any money. She has to raise all of it. Frank Anonia here is terrific, and I loved him because he was competitive. Again, it seemed like a lot of the teachers wanted to downplay the competitive aspect. They didn't want to make it appear like they're in it to win it. But Frank, totally in it to win it. And there's nothing wrong with that, he should be.
Nobody complains when the football team wants to win the championship.
Nobody at all.
And I found it interesting because all this concern about competition, but hey, you have to audition to get the part. Isn't
That's
that
competitive.
competition?
Yeah.
And what also is wonderful about theater is that it's not like there's only so many slots. Very often, just like me, I could find a spot on the stage crew, or you could find a spot, somewhere doing as an extra. There were a lot of ways to find a home in theater.
Yeah, there's always a way to be involved. You may not be front and center on stage, but you can do something and really contribute to it. This is what we called sort of the preparation sequence, where now we see each of the schools just sort of preparing. This is Tashay's rap.
And it really gave us an insight into how Tashay, who had not had an easy life, found joy in theater and a family, and you can see how much that meant to her.
Some of the criticism that we had toward this film early on was that there was a lack of racial diversity in the film. And not that was something that we sought. It was sort of the
reality of suburban Pennsylvania where this was shot. And believe me, these were not all upper class kids or middle class kids. There was a whole gamut of schools and experiences that these students brought to bear.
Yeah, and we could only take our cameras where the story was.
Part of what we wanted to do was communicate the whole process, to show that these kids didn't arrive on the stage at the Freddy's with their perfectly polished performances, but there was so much work and so much effort that went into it. And even to the extent of how they're doing their homework and they're studying. And I even love this scene where the kid's knitting. I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing that shows what it means to be part of this theater experience in high school.
So the film is almost split in half, where the first half of the film is preparing for their performances, and then the second half is preparation for, and then the actual Freddie Award ceremony itself,
where we find out, where the kids won, lost, and had the incredible experience of being on live television.
But at this point, we haven't even entered the nomination sequence, so the audience knows very little about the Freddie Awards other than the bits of expository information that have been doled out so far.
And what you are getting here is you're seeing some of the very archetypical elements of a teacher who's frustrated because the kids are messing up, or technical problems that they're trying to solve, and all the trials and tribulations of putting on a school play every year.
Who doesn't remember having a teacher like this that had a little outburst? We all do, and that's what I loved about these moments, is that you might call them cliched, but they're familiar, and I think that's why people who did high school theater like the film so much, because it really relates to what their experiences were.
And that shot of the Parkland stage crew, one of the things I loved about Parkland was their stage crew was almost all girls, and I thought that was great.
I love Frank's "That Sucks." Always got a big laugh. We're an audience. That shot, remember where that was taken? Do you remember?
Yep, we were shooting over above Pius, looking down on the
That's right.
town.
Pius X High School in Roseto.
And again, there are these iconic moments that are classic, that everyone remembers, and it's this pre-show pep talk where the teacher is really trying to get all the kids to come together in the night before the performance.
Which also, I should say, is reminiscent of what we see in locker rooms before a big game. And so when we were putting the movie together, we were really trying to find bits and pieces of theater experiences that were similar to the high school sports experience.
And one of the things that makes this scene so meaningful is that by this point the audience realizes just, what a tough cookie Rita Cortez is. So when she compliments them, it really, really means something.
By the way, if you go to our website, www.mostvaluableplayersmovie.com, you can see that scene in its entirety. And it didn't quite play out the way you saw it edited here. Now, this is Katie away from Allie, and this was actually the very first interview that we did with Katie. Kurt, our DP, discovered her crying, and we interviewed her, and we love this kick here.
Yep.
Love the sound.
It just says it all.
Production sound mixer Ken King picked up that little whop. Now you can also see the two different theaters and the way we could shoot them. Parkland was such a large space, and we actually were up in the rafters. This shot was from a catwalk looking down onto the stage, and it was terrific. And you could see they had a magnificent production. Now, Emmaus, much smaller theater, half the size of the Parkland Theater.
And again, the stage crew, I have to tell you, look at these rotating stages. I mean, Broadway, this is Broadway level stuff that these kids built everything themselves. It was amazing, amazing. I even had one teacher who brought me, the math teacher, who brought me all of the calculations they did to make sure that the rotating stage could support the students.
Now we use split screen coming up. We put the two schools side by side so the audience could sort of get a feel for the two productions, one sort of very big in this grand space and the other one much more intimate
And much more of a sense of a familiar moment of being close to the cast and the performances.
And now we split the screen like that. It's as if a curtain's opening, and we go here to Freedom High School. Now, we didn't shoot this footage. We were actually not in Pennsylvania when Freedom High School was doing their performances. We hadn't quite settled in on Freedom yet, and so we weren't putting a lot of energy into them at this point. And so this is footage taken from a parent's HD camera.
Yep.
That's why we get this shot here, and it's not very clean, but it's kind of terrific. You just get like the silhouette of the hands clapping.
And
remember,
this is happening at 27 other schools, not just, the ones that we were able to follow.
Now, this is probably my favorite scene in the movie because I just think that it represents what high school theater is. And almost every high school, just about every theater in the country has some odd tradition that they do before a show or after a show. And here it's this American Pie chorus line, and we actually used two cameras. Matthew was out in the audience, and Kurt was smack in the middle of the circle. And Kurt was holding our expensive camera, and so these shoes were like missiles.
Dodging flying shoes, and he said the smell of dirty socks was overwhelming in this scene.
Well, I didn't know that. I was just trying to stay out of the way of the cameras and the shoes. But this was really great. And what was interesting was that when we were editing this, we kept making it a little bit shorter because at a longer length, it didn't hit the quite emotional button that we wanted.
And we were so glad we were even able to use the scene. Remember, for all of the scenes with music, we had to get permission from the rights holders to utilize it. And
then we had to pay.
And we had to, so, some of them were not so easy to obtain.
It actually took us 1.5 years to clear all of the music rights. It's a long time.
Yes.
So now we are post-shows. We used to call this the post-show sequence when we were putting the film together.
And it's, again, another tradition. When the play is over, everyone coming together to share in that experience, to kind of bring closure to it, and also to open up to the next part of what comes for these students, which is waiting for the nominations to see who is going to be up for a Freddie that year.
And I love this because Jennifer's sort of talking about the community of theater, and she even mentions that other schools are doing Les Mis, and we couldn't have written that better. It was sort of nice and clean. for us because the audience knows, of course, that there are other schools doing Les Mis as well.
And she again brings it home that it's about the experience, and that the Freddies are important, but the experience is what they will have for the rest of their lives.
Which again is juxtaposed to people like Mark Stutz and Frank Annonia, who certainly feel the same way, but are much more competitive and much more
Focused
about
on the prize.
bringing
Yeah.
home that prize. And this, we were here for hours that day because although, of course, in this sequence we focus on just three seniors, Amanda, Zach, and John, Zach crying here, we couldn't show the speeches for all the kids because, again, the movie would be 10 hours long. But this was a very emotional day, and Jennifer's so sincere, and the kids just adore her.
And what she also had to do, which is in this scene, is she had to then share with the kids the very difficult news that we had all only just recently learned, that the beloved Freddie coordinator Vic Huma had been diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah, and so we use this as a bridge to that because when we ourselves found out that Vic had cancer, we didn't exactly know how we were going to deal with it because we were making a film about High School Musical theater, not a film about cancer. And there's plenty of documentaries about cancer. So that became an issue for us. And
We really honestly weren't sure we could include it because of the fact that it wasn't, part of the story of the Freddies, but yet Vic was such an integral part of the community and of the Freddies program that it just felt like it would have been disingenuous not to have included it. And in the end, we had to struggle very hard to be able to hit the right notes, to have that as part of the story, and yet not overwhelm the film with the information.
And earlier cuts that we had, we did have more of Vic's ordeal, and we got a lot of criticism. In fact, some criticism made the suggestion that we should just remove the Vic storyline completely. And there were one or two critics in the nation who saw the movie who felt the same way. But like you said, that would have been disingenuous because as you see throughout the movie, it really was woven into the fabric of the Freddies that year. And so this DVD includes two sequences that we didn't use. And you can review those sequences in the extra section of this DVD and see if you agree with us leaving those sequences out.
And I think that I would never forget when I met Rosie O'Donnell and she talked about the film. She said, Vic was not a Broadway musical ending. And I think one of the things about being a documentarian is that I had a great writer in Chris in helping to put together the script for this film, but we also had the writer upstairs, and he had his say.
He sure did. Love the shot. This musical score, we have 45 minutes of original score by Randy Miller conducting a 65-piece orchestra. I mean, it's incredible, and it's put to good use in this sequence, what we called, while we were putting the film together, the nomination sequence, and it's about 8 minutes long, I think.
Yeah, this was a very long, in fact, when we were in the studio recording this sequence, it was the most difficult one to pull off for the score.
But it was also tough for us story-wise because there was a lot of information that we needed to cover. We wanted to talk about what the nomination process means. We wanted to talk about what the nomination process was, the actual intricacies of being nominated. And then we wanted to see the nominations, and it was how much do we show, how much do we not show. It was pretty tough. Plus, we introduced Ed Hanna. So this was a sequence that was filled with information.
Pulled me aside and she said, we'd like you to be the co-host for the Freddie Awards next year.
It also has what I like to call the Guffman moment when Ed Hanna talks about his own High School Musical theater experiences and suddenly chimes in and shows us his costume from when he played Conrad Birdie.
Here it is now.
And sings for us for a moment.
Yeah, thanks, Ed Hanna. That cost us a lot of money.
But what you really see now is just how much this community is invested in these kids, in this program.
Yeah, I mean, they are putting out a live news broadcast of the nominations, just like they do with the Oscars.
And truly, it makes such a big difference in terms of the way it's received and how connected people feel to the schools and to this great program.
Let's talk a little bit about the technical aspect of shooting this because, again, we didn't have a very large crew. We only had 4 people come with us from Los Angeles. It was me and Matthew and our DP, Kurt, and our production sound mixer, Ken King. That was it. And then we got local crew. And the question was, how are we going to be at all these different places? We needed to be at Parkland, Emmaus, and Freedom, and we needed to be
In
at
the studio,
WFMZ
at the
Studios.
TV studio.
So Matthew
I
was at
the studio.
WFMZ with some assistants.
Yep, I had my AD with me, and that was great. And
And then Kurt and I and a couple of other people were at Freedom High School. And then we had, we actually gave Ben Roth, a student at Emmaus High School, a kid cam. And so he shot all of the footage at Emmaus High School. He's actually now, I believe, a film student in Philadelphia.
and he did a terrific job.
And we had Steve Cameron at Parkland High School. This is Leanna Norwood. She's absolutely beautiful and is a runway and print model. She just has flawless skin, that girl.
And
Our split screen there. The enthusiasm from Freedom High School was so astounding. And it was really at that moment, that day, where we knew that Freedom High School had to be the heart and soul of this film. When we gathered at the end of the day to discuss our different experiences, and I believe we had you watch the dailies of this, and I said, we have got to just put them at the center, and we really need to now make the commitment to Freedom High School and spend a lot more time with them to get the coverage. This, of course, was just a great moment. Audiences laugh at that and applaud. It's just great to see how excited the kids are.
in that last scene, for just a second, you actually saw that Jill Keebler had her baby right before the nomination.
Oh, at Emmaus, yeah. Yeah, she's holding on to her baby. We might get another shot of that again.
What was so amazing too was how lucky we were to be able to get like this moment when Allie gets her nomination, that we had our key people covered in this absolutely critical scene.
And of course, a lot of it was retro-engineered, because when it came time to determine who were we going to focus the movie on in the writing process and the editing room, it was about the coverage that we had. And we knew that we wanted to follow high school seniors who were not going to be involved in the Freddies next year, and we needed to follow kids who would be nominated. So in theory, we really couldn't make a lot of hard decisions until the nominations, because we didn't want to follow a kid and then find out that he's not nominated, and then we can't follow him through the whole Freddie process. So that also had a bearing on what schools and what kids we followed.
And really, from this point forward, the filming process was like a whirlwind, because it was 2 weeks from this day to the day of the Freddie Awards, and there was so much going on. I mean, these kids are preparing for finals. They're going to their proms. So many things are happening. They're rehearsing for the Freddies, and we had to really feel like we were in every place at once in the process.
And we really were in every place at once. And it was not easy because, again, we're a very small film crew and did not have a lot of money to make this movie. So it didn't allow us to be everywhere. This is John's famous line that ended up in the trailer for the movie. Actually, it's the button of the trailer.
Talk about how these awards don't matter. You can't help but get caught up in it.
And I often describe, we often describe John as our Yogi Berra character, because so many of the things that he says in the interviews are things that you would hear Yogi Berra saying.
I can't say that I know how this is going to turn out because it's always different each year.
In fact, even this scene was controversial because there were those who thought that the girls were serious, that they had slept with the judges. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it was suggested by some people in the Lehigh Valley that we snip that out, but we stood our ground. It gets one of the biggest laughs in the movie, and it's great. Some more of our travelogue shots, as we call them. And now we move into the second half of the film, which is just full steam ahead toward the Freddie Awards.
These students from all 27 schools.
We have Ed explain to us now really what the process is, because our vision of this is limited. We can't show you all 27 schools, but we have to make sure that the audience understands that there are more than just 3 schools involved in the Freddie Awards.
Kids, instead of just having these rivalries, getting along, cheering for each other.
That was Laura Melchior, the girl in the yellow, that we spoke about earlier, who was really an integral part of the film, but eventually didn't make it.
And the interesting part about this point in the film is very much that it's almost as if you've had the first half of the film and then the film magically restarts at the point when we go into the rehearsals for the Freddies. What I love about what comes next in this process as they learn the parts that they're going to have to perform and the dance sequences, which are the opening and closing numbers for the Freddies and so forth, you really see that, in fact, it's a whole new process that they have to start. And we like to call this our American Idol scene during the rehearsal, during the auditions for the various solos and other elements in the Freddie Awards that happens at the beginning of the rehearsal process.
Now, the choreographer that you just met, Dina Thompson, she did not want to be interviewed. And it was like pulling teeth to get her to sit down for 2 minutes. Even after she saw the film, she was very disheartened, claiming that she sounds like Minnie Mouse. I think she sounds great. And so this is the American Idol-esque part that Matthew was just talking about.
And our editor, Zach, did a wonderful job of taking all of these different auditions and tying them together in a way that's engaging and really gives you a feeling for all the different kids, the different kinds of talent, and how they had to make a selection and match these kids up to the different parts and with each other.
How about that beard on Vince? The kid with the beret?
There's so many people who say he's not in high school. They don't believe it.
He's 50. I can't even grow a beard like that. That's Ariel Justice from Liberty
Absolutely
High School.
beautiful girl, yes.
And that's Brittany.
With quite a set of pipes. She really has a big voice.
And here's John,
Who always sounds like Elvis, unfortunately.
He doesn't
in this
quite
scene.
hit those notes, but he has a lot of heart.
And that's what so much of it's about, It's about the heart and what you put into your performance, and that, I think, comes through in the film.
This setting is the Acopian Ballroom. It's actually upstairs from the theater, and they use it for all sorts of events, and including rehearsal space, and it's really a great space.
And just a technical note, this room was a nightmare to shoot in because it had this yellow paint and a yellow cast and terrible lighting. And when we got to post-production, our friends at Technicolor did an amazing job making these scenes look good.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of the film is made from so many different people. We had amazing artisans from Zach Braff. Zach Braff is our editor, but he's not the actor from Scrubs. He's our very own editor. And he really got that ball rolling in post. And then the boys and girls at Technicolor were amazing.
The thing to me that represents Vic is
Now this, of course, this sequence, we call this Vic Sings. This was what we call Vic Sings.
What I love about this sequence is that it really gives you an insight into who he was as a person and what he meant to the community. What was difficult about it is that it's also actually a recreation because we weren't there at the time. And this is a documentary, and this is one of the few scenes that we had to, in many ways, craft from scratch in order to put you back into that moment, because we didn't have that. And it was both sort of controversial, and yet at the same time, we felt we were able to be successful in putting you in that moment with him when he sang that song.
And this film was one of 100 documentaries the year it was released that was eligible for an Academy Award. And in that process, we had to very carefully note scenes that were recreated, and so.
And because you're only allowed a small amount of these kinds of scenes in order to be able to be eligible for consideration by the Academy.
As a documentary.
As a documentary, that's correct.
A beautiful morning. He makes every day a beautiful morning.
And you can feel Shelley's emotion in this moment. This scene is one of my favorite scenes.
This was actually shot by me and Steve Cameron. It was actually shot the night that you guys were all off at Ed Hanna's house having a wonderful dinner, and we were here. And it's a very nice button to that scene.
And I just love the community. I mean, I know those travel log shots, but you really can feel like that sense of where you are in America.
This is another scene that you didn't see on OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network.
I can't sing or dance at all, but I have to poke at the beginning.
This kid, Devin, is a stand-up comedian, and he's making films also.
It's one of the moments when we get to touch on the sense of how people who are in the arts and in theater are stereotyped. And they're, either for sexuality or for whatever, and, how these kids deal with that today. I think it's more accepted today than it was when we were kids. But nevertheless, kids get called gay for being in theater, and this is just sort of a bit of an insight into that.
Whatever, call me gay. I'm not going to let you label me just because of what I like to do.
It doesn't matter what you are. You're a person just like
Here's the football player from another school who's in theater.
Yeah, because we really wanted to touch upon that subject. And what was interesting was we interviewed so many educators and professionals that were not included, and we asked every one of them about the gay stereotype, or really why there are a lot of gays attracted to musical theater, and nobody had an answer. And because nobody had an answer, there wasn't really anything for us to include. It was just sort of just the way it is.
And many people were even reticent to go discuss that subject with us in an
well,
open
the teachers, a lot of the high school students, a lot of the high school teachers didn't want to discuss it.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
That's for sure, yeah.
The kids were more open, but the teachers...
They were, and the college professors that we spoke about and some of the theater professionals that we spoke to were also very candid, but nobody had any answers.
Now here we're going into the voting process, and we were excluded from the room during the actual voting process, so we really knew nothing about that.
Well, I'm going to make a confession, okay? Can I make a confession?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to make a confession right here in front of you and in front of everybody. Yeah, we got kicked out of this jury room, but I was right outside those metal doors, and I was laying down on the ground with my ear to, like where the bottom of the door and the floor meets, listening to everything. I was very muffled, and I couldn't hear a lot of things, but here's what I knew. I'm making this confession now to the world. I knew that Best Overall Musical was between Freedom High School and Emmaus High School. So I knew it was going to be one of those two. I heard that, but I couldn't hear any other discussion. And also, too, don't forget, they vote on it. So even the jurors don't actually know who's going to win. Just whoever tallies those votes at the end knows. So I did know that. I knew that Parkland had been knocked out at this point, which I was surprised because I really thought that they had an amazing show.
That was where I thought it was going to end up myself.
Yeah.
So.
And
I love this moment of humor that Vic had.
And here we actually see this interview with Vic. If you look at the extras, we have included that actual interview between him and the journalist who wrote that story. And again, this is one of those moments where the theater community has rallied together to help Vic and his family, and and it was an important moment. If Shelley were just talking about some bank that wrote up a check for $25,000, we probably wouldn't have included it. But this is about the community coming together and people who know Vic and love Vic sending $1 or sending $5 and accumulating, I think she says almost $20,000. So that's why to us it was important, because again, like you keep bringing up the word community, it conveyed that motif.
And after the film was made, the community banded together and had a bust created of Vic, who now greets all of the patrons of the theater as they enter.
Yeah, it's hanging in the lobby, and it's quite nice. Now, this is Chris Varco. He's a Parkland parent, and he just came up to us. We were shooting the Parkland Art Fair, and I think we were preparing to leave, and he comes up to us and says, "Hey, are you guys shooting that documentary?" And it was kind of an obvious question, and we said yes, and he seemed to have a lot of opinions, and so we shot him. And what we loved about him was that he sounds like he's talking about sports. So again, it's one of those moments where
when he does his statistical model for us, as an MIT graduate, I was thrilled. I said, "This is classic. This is great."
Yeah, the predictive model. And again, he's talking as if he's, like it's sports book or something. So again, we're always looking for those moments where you could say, wow, this could be theater or it could be sports.
And I also love this moment, aside from seeing Frank Anonia perched up atop that ladder.
Yeah, we didn't put him there, but we're sure glad that's where we found him.
Because this rehearsal is one of those great moments where you really can see these kids in their glory. And one thing about this technically that you should know is amazingly when you watch this upcoming rehearsal scene, it was all shot with a single camera. And how we got the coverage, I can only say, Kurt Aptahan, you're a genius.
Well, we actually shot it like 3 or 4 times while they were rehearsing.
Still,
and
between Kurt and Zach's editing,
yeah, we got a lot of great
seamless.
coverage. And we wanted to include this, I think, because we wanted to sort of mislead the audience a little bit into thinking, maybe Parkland's going to win. That's why we're spending extra time with them. And they're really incredible. And that's
Ethan. And
what's her name again? Morgan Riley.
Morgan Riley.
And she's now at NYU, and she was, I think, a sophomore here.
Yes.
And man, what pipe! Maybe she was even a freshman.
I think.
And listen to these pipes on this girl. And her last show at Parkland was my favorite year, and she was tremendous in that.
And this is a great scene because there's more foreshadowing.
Yes, I love it because if you listen to Frank, he makes a prediction as to how many awards they're going to win. He says, I think we're going to come home
with more than one.
More than one. Matthew, how many do they come home with? I think they come home. Well, you'll find out. And here you can just so melodious. I mean, they're really terrific. Every time a flag waved, I always made sure that Kurt got that in the shot.
And one thing here is this girl at the final scene, when she looks at Frank for that approval and where to go, that says it all.
We crashed the prom. You weren't with us, Matthew, were you?
No, I was shooting another scene somewhere else. But
so we came to the prom, and I actually ended up being Tache's prom date, and because she stagged it. So, and we just crashed the prom, and it was actually a lot of fun.
And you can even see how Jennifer, she's like one of the kids, you know. She's the chaperone, but she's like one of the kids at the prom.
Now they're doing We're Going to the Freddy's, which they did after they were nominated. That was a potential title for the movie.
Yes.
Actually. And this is the We're Going to the Freddy's musical montage, and here you get to listen to Randy Miller's composition, and it's really terrific.
And it's this great moment where you really feel the excitement building. You can really see, oh my God, this is going to be big. This is happening.
Here's Katie in front of the green screen. I mean, they really go all out. This is a show that looks like anything you would see on any network. It's that terrific. They produce an amazing show.
And this,
I love that we got Ed Hanna doing the weather report there that night. It was great. This kid here is, I think he's at Princeton now.
even the point of having to do the sound checks and recording fill tracks.
These shots are just so beautiful. Kurt did a terrific job here. Very painterly, and the theater lights certainly make for good stuff. I love this here. We've got Dina, and that's Wilson Black, the official photographer of the Freddie Awards. We're always trying to make sure that we got coverage of the kids that we were following. So we always tried to make sure that either John was in the shot, or Zach, or Amanda, or Kate, or Allie.
And I love here at the end this tentative moment between John and the kid who played Tevye when he puts his arm around him, and that camaraderie.
That's Paul Avery, who played Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof that year.
I'm really excited. I know we're going to do such a good job.
This scene, not in the premiere broadcast on OWN.
Yes. It really shows how, these kids have so much going on in their lives at this point, and, it's that moment where, maybe they don't have it together. Maybe they're not being,
Yeah, they're very excited about this, but they're kids. They're texting, they're on their phones. It's the first time when we sort of see that especially Freedom High School, that they're kind of regular kids.
And how, what's interesting for us was how it was the seniors that year who got together and rallied the kids, all the other kids, to say, hey, we got to do this right.
And that's the next scene.
Yes.
Which also was not in the OWN broadcast. It's Vic keeping a careful eye on the proceedings. Now, Jennifer would not allow our cameras into that lobby there to actually hear what the kids were saying. Zach is giving them some sort of bitch slapping, for lack of a better term. And so she kept us out there and sort of gave us the blow-by-blow as to what was going on.
And yet, at the end, they do the same thing that they do in the sports team. They huddle, and they do a cheer.
Well, in that first scene where we meet Freedom High School, where they do this chant, and now they do it again, this time very quietly.
Yes, my favorite part is at the end of the cheer, they shh each other.
Another expensive song.
And I think this really, again, brings home that moment of that anyone who's been in theater has been experiences when, the director comes and says, hey, you guys got to really put it forth. You got to bring everything to this moment.
Yeah, this is a speech that we have heard 50 million times across the country, probably across the world. There's not a high school theater student who has not had this speech. It might actually be in some sort of teacher's handbook.
These moves look perfect. But it's not coming from here.
Yeah, the "it's not coming from here" speech. I like that you've got Shelley there, who sort of has this smile on her face, because she knows that this is being delivered in with all good spirits.
But I'm a little nervous watching it right now.
And I think that what's true is that we all need that speech at a certain point in that exhausting preparation process to say, this is it, guys. This is the final final mile.
We certainly need it in the movie, that's for sure. Because we're beginning to approach the actual Freddie sequence, and you want to sort of get the idea that, okay, maybe it's not all as great as it could be.
And maybe something might really go terribly wrong, too.
Actors and actresses.
Now we just hit most of the key characters again to get their thoughts before we start the Freddie Award sequence.
Well, we used to call this the campfire sequence. As the kids get Freddy ready, it's sort of everyone's sitting around the night before the big game and marshaling themselves for that big moment. And let's face it, the Freddys are broadcast live. If something screws up, it goes out to millions of homes.
Yeah, it goes out to over 5 million homes. So that's a lot of potential people who could watch that broadcast. So it's gotta look good. Plus the idea that the performances help to fuel fundraising efforts for the high schools later on.
And this shows really how much the media builds the excitement and the expectations within the community. By the time the Freddy broadcast comes on, everybody is poised and waiting for them to begin.
Now this song is called Cross the Line, and it's from the Broadway musical Big, which is the adaptation of the Tom Hanks movie. And we decided to do a montage here of the kids arriving. And we also wanted to make sure that we saw all of the people that we've been following through the movie. For instance, we heard about Vic's family, and there they are. And we also wanted to make sure the audience knew our characters.
Because they'd be in costume,
Right.
as Amanda is here.
So that's why we do the lower third there with Amanda's name here, Katie and Allie, because again, they're in costumes. So, and this is just sort of a fun moment, and it's a great song. This song was actually part of the opening number, but we didn't want to have a 12-minute opening number, so we actually edited from the opening number, which you're about to see, and we put it here in the montage.
So one thing here was that this particular part of the film was logistically the most challenging part. Because sure, we had the television cameras to utilize, but we also had to be able to cover everything, to see the different students, to see the teachers, to see the parents. So what we did was we not only had our cameras, the few cameras that we had manned, but we mounted cameras. For example, you could see we mounted a camera in the television truck. We mounted cameras in the wings around the theater and even under the stage, so that if there was a moment when someone had a great expression or something, you would catch it. As a result of that, you'll see that there are some scenes where the camera actually vibrates because the kids are dancing on top of the stage under where these cameras were mounted. And trying to edit together all of these different cameras and footage and give you a seamless experience of the broadcast was very challenging, but we were very excited with the way it turned out.
What was sort of interesting or ironic was that we were excited that the TV cameras were there because they were going to get coverage. So anything that perhaps we missed, we knew that we could rely on the TV cameras. That was part of the excitement of actually shooting this event. But
yeah, we didn't realize that we'd have to stay out of their way the whole time.
Yeah,
too.
we had to stay out of their way, and so we were stuck in corners, and so it actually was both a blessing and a curse because we didn't have the freedom of the theater like the TV cameras did.
And not only that, remember the TV camera is going to focus in on the winners that happened at a particular award, and if we were following a student who didn't win, we had to be able to get a shot of that student's expression at the moment when he didn't win, and so we actually came to call that camera the loser cam.
Yes, doesn't sound like it's all in good spirits, Matthew, but that's what we
in
called
fact, though, the reality was that the grace with which these students handled both their victories and their losses, I found pretty incredible and was really taken by.
Yeah, we couldn't rely on the WFMZ TV cameras to capture the elements that we needed to tell our story. So we had to make sure that our cameras were focused on our people. And but that could be tough because somebody could be in our way and we weren't able to jump out of our little corners.
One other element was that nobody wants to watch a 3-hour broadcast. And not only that, here...
Wait a minute. Don't say that. WFMZ doesn't want to hear that nobody wants to watch a 3-hour broadcast because they do watch the 3-hour broadcast.
What I mean
in
is,
our movie,
at the end of our movie, after having seen the entire film, we had to find a way to take what was a 3-hour broadcast and convey all of the excitement and all of the things that happened, and yet at the same time make it move and make it fit into our 90-minute film.
All right, so now Katie wins. I'm up there in the balcony, so we just shot her parents, and she's the first of the 5, and we had to determine where we were going to place each award for our 5 kids, because the way it actually happened on the Night of the Freddy's is not the way it unfolds in the film. We have to reveal the information in a certain way to create a certain sort of rhythm and drama and tension. So we start with Katie, who wins, and then we take it from there.
Now, just there you saw Corey Jones, who
this here is Corey Jones,
Freddie alumnus, and he was someone who we followed even when he moved to California to start his acting career. He didn't make it into the final edit of the film, but luckily you see him here as a presenter, an alumnus presenter at the Freddy's.
Yeah, he's a great kid and such a great sport. We spent a lot of time with him, and we had a lot of footage of him, and he actually was in an earlier cut, but it just didn't make it. Now we've got Allie, and this is the first time that we really hear Allie sing. It's the first time we really hear a lot of our kids, or at least see them performing, and we purposefully decided to hold off until the end of the movie, because we could have heard Allie sing throughout the movie, but we thought it would make more sense to present it here at this moment when it was most important for the audience.
And I gotta say, her voice is fantastic, and it really is. You see these kids shine. You see all this hard work pay off.
The controversy regarding Emmaus's performance and Allie's moment is that Rita Cortez is not into the whole concept of the Broadway belt. And so you might have a singer really belting that song out, where Allie is not belting it quite as much, and she's singing it in a different way, but it's just, her tone is beautiful, and she did a magnificent job. And I thought she was going to win the Freddie Award.
That was one of the awards I was quite surprised by in the final outcome, that she did not win the award.
Which we'll see in a minute. We sort of ruined it for anybody who didn't watch the film, but I'm assuming you've probably seen the film before you listening to us. And we should point out some of the various cameras. Now, this is, Matthew is shooting all of this stuff backstage. This is the WFMZ camera. And the thing that we have to keep in mind is that we're using, again, HD cameras and standard def cameras. Anything that this station is shooting is standard def.
Even this 4-up where you see the different nominees was something that we created. It wasn't part of the broadcast.
Right. Now, that's our camera shooting Allie. Allie loses to Veronica Strover, who plays Miss Adelaide in Easton's production of Guys and Dolls, but we get Allie's face right there, just enough. It would have been great if we could have stuck that camera right in her face, but we were literally shooting from the other side of the room.
There you saw a shot from the wings, from a stationary camera. And in fact, during commercial breaks, I had to have various production assistants running around replacing tapes on all those stationary cameras so that they would keep rolling throughout the 3-hour broadcast.
And that's the WFMZ camera. Most of this here is WFMZ. This is our camera. I believe is that one of our cameras?
That was the wide shot. And I love these moments where we're actually shooting some of the parents and fellow students and teachers in the audiences, you know, really rooting for their kids, like that girl who's singing along with the Parkland.
It was great to have this kind of coverage because it makes the documentary look so much richer, even though it's not anything that we actually shot. We just stole the footage. Thank you, WFMZ.
And here you see one kid coming out congratulating a rival school and a rival kid, which is something that gets built up. And you see that these kids really build relationships with other schools and kids from other schools in coming to the front.
Now, this is a montage sequence that you didn't see on OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. And we put this in the movie because we wanted the audience to know that other schools are nominated and that there's other winners. And it's great to see all the various costumes and
And
This
even the
is-
community participants, like, you know,
Right, that was Joe Owen that we just saw. And there's Bobby Gunther, the WAEB disc jockey.
and they all come and participate as presenters at the Freddie Awards every year.
We even have a camera inside that WFMZ trailer with the director and the AD right there. And there's that camera that's mounted in the wings.
In the back, all those girls were the other girls that were up for the same award, you know, that
Amanda's up for.
in this
But we
scene.
couldn't show all those girls performing. Again, there's a time issue for us, and there's an expense. Also, she hits that note, Mom, just putting her hand over the mouth. But it's great. And so now we go to Amanda's award. Traditionally, the Best Actor and Actress awards are the very, very close to the end. But in terms of sort of creating an emotional rhythm, we chose not to make Amanda's award last. We chose to use some other awards.
And in this award, one of the things I love is you see her best friend is sitting next to her, rooting for her, and you see the other people that are up for the awards, and Amanda, you know, trying not to show her you know, nervousness.
Disappointment, perhaps.
And what's lovely, too, is you can see Amanda's personality. She reaches out and congratulates the winner.
Yeah, she really seems genuinely happy for the girl.
And then her best friend comforting her.
And this, of course, is Freedom High School, so they're really just trying to be polite to clap because their girl Amanda didn't win. And now we go to Zach's award. And what's interesting is that Zach is the only one of the 5 students that we don't see perform at the Freddy's, and that's because he didn't perform at the Freddy's. That was an issue that I had early on, but there wasn't anything that we could do about it because he didn't perform. And there was a critic somewhere in the country that pointed that out. And usually if a filmmaker can see a potential flaw, there's going to be a critic somewhere that does too. Now we've got Zach coming out. You see Katie there. She's crying because Ian, her co-star, took the award home. Now this is standard def footage, and I hate this. It drives me crazy, those far shots.
And there's the shoes.
There's
Well-
Proud Dad.
Yep. But I think what comes through so much in this, even to the fact that, you know, the people in the booth are laughing at him, is how, you know, maybe he's not the best singer or the best dancer, but boy, he has heart, and boy, he sells that performance. He also lost the mic, which was not a real mic, it was just a prop, which is why
But
you
he's
still
so
hear him.
accustomed to performing with it that he almost still sings to it.
But it's live television, so you just got to go with whatever happens, and that's what they did. So
That's one of our mounted cameras there that's just sort of shooting up the aisle. And this shot almost, that little shot there right here, almost duplicates that shot that we saw earlier at the actual performance
of Bye Bye Birdie, that's right.
when we had the silhouetted hands.
And the fact that they had these crane shots, that the TV station brought in the crane, gave us such a wonderful sense of a bird's eye view to go to.
And it just sweeps in. It's great.
And really gives you that sense of majesty of this whole
And
thing.
so now we're doing John because we really felt that a lot of the emotional heart of the movie was around John. And so even though it's a featured award, and in theory, in the actual Night of the Freddy's, his award was given out before Amanda's category was. And he wins here, and of course the enthusiasm from
the
Freedom High School was
jubilation's
great.
incredible. And even the kids backstage.
I've been there throughout this whole thing. Miss Wesco is the best. She's the highlight of my life. Thank you so
Now, how many high school students say that about their teacher?
He's still saying it.
And what's great also is when the kids come backstage afterwards, and you saw that with Katie earlier, they not only get their photos taken, but they're interviewed by the local papers.
They get to meet the press.
And meet the press.
This was no
And now we come to the final award, and Vic, who is presenting the big award of the night, for Best Musical. And what's interesting to me is we caught a moment where the director of the TV broadcast on the right, it's the first time he hears that Vic is sick.
Right here.
He didn't know. And there's a beautiful moment that comes up where he reaches up, and not just his family is tearing up in the audience, but even the people back in the crew and in the trucks are crying.
Now, I have to say that I never thought that he was wiping a tear away. I know you and Zach think he's wiping tears away. I think he's just scratching his nose, if you really want to know the truth. I always thought he was scratching his nose.
I have his whole scene. I know he was teared up a little. He didn't want to show it, but he was.
We just slow the speed down a little bit as Vic walks out. And to have a camera up there with his family, it was very intrusive, and it wasn't the most comfortable situation for us, but we felt like we had to do it.
Well, and Vic...
That's Vic's brother.
...was wonderful. Vic, early on, after his diagnosis, came to us and gave us permission to use him and use his story, or not use it. He really had that generosity of spirit that was so extraordinary and came through in such a tough time.
I'm going to make another confession. You can actually hear me right there. We love you, Vic. I scream it from the balcony. Because it's true. We do love Vic.
We do love Vic.
You have all done for me, and I appreciate it.
And he's so understated, and it's not an overly sentimental moment. He's not giving some long, maudlin speech because it's not about him. He doesn't want it to be about him. He never wanted it to be about him. And that was what he did tell us. He said, this is not a movie about me. It's a movie about the Freddys. It's a movie about the kids.
And the other thing I love about this scene is there's another classic Vic moment after he announces all the nominees. He proceeds to say, thank you and good night, before announcing the award, and gets a big laugh.
Sort of
that's classic Vic. Just classic Vic.
Now we do split screen here, and I have to tell you, I was up in the balcony, and I was saying, freedom, 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 freedom. I really wanted freedom to win, not because I favored them, I just thought that it would give the movie a little bit more of an emotional ending. But this is sort of, it becomes sort of like a Rocky ending where they don't win, but they do win the most awards of the night.
Well, your co-writer upstairs had another way for this to go.
That's how it works. Also, too, it's important, I think, to keep in mind that I'm not sure if audiences are really rooting for schools per se. They might be. Some might be picking a school. I suspect that there are a lot of people who are not rooting for Parkland. But, so I think that the audience is genuinely happy with whoever wins in the end.
And so after the Freddy's end, there's a big party that takes place and everyone's celebrating.
Well, this was we were trying to figure out how to do this because we wanted to sort of condense time a little bit. And originally, the idea was we were going to just play out that number in its entirety, and then we would do the after party. But then Matthew had the idea, let's cut it together. And it worked much better this way, I thought.
It keeps the energy of the night there as we see what happens, and ultimately, it's important for us to get a real sort of scorecard to recap because nobody can remember it. And so this scene also, as everyone's celebrating and departing for the evening with their final words, gives us a chance to stop with each teacher and find out how it really ended up. And gee, I guess that was only one award that came through for them. And if this isn't like a sports moment with the cheer, I don't know what is.
Now we go back to we're going to the Freddy chant, although here we went to the Freddys.
And so much of it for us was we had to be able to find payoffs. If we set something up earlier, we had to have a payoff at the end of the film.
That's our shot that we used in so much of our PR.
And, a lot of people think this would be the end of the film, but we knew we needed something more. And so this is our Monday morning quarterback
But this
moment.
was a very tough sequence because we couldn't figure out how to segue from the ending of the Freddie Awards to this. So we came up with that shot of the confetti falling, and then we decided to keep my voice in there for the segue. asking the questions, and it just worked.
And frankly, I think that as much as we had concern about not ending the film at that last scene with
Yeah,
the
because
confetti,
originally we had always, the movie was going to end with the Freddie Awards. When the Freddie Awards was over, the movie was over.
but it was just, when we cut this and we put it on, it was so clear that this was absolutely critical, that this was what people needed to bring it all together and to give people a sense of closure and of understanding that made sense.
Yeah, because we got to hear what the teachers felt about the night before, and then we get to sort of wrap things up with the students as well. Now, that always gets a big laugh in the theater when Mark talks about the discrimination of Parkland. And Mark really loves his students and cares so much about the program at Parkland High School. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, he's not even that he's competitive. He's a big Papa Bear. He's just protecting his own.
Yeah, his students are everything to him, and he will go out there to the wire and do whatever it takes for them.
Mark's been an amazing supporter of this film, and he was just amazing. Jennifer, of course, she's also been a great supporter, and a big reason why people own the Oprah Winfrey Network certainly love Jennifer. And I think her presence in the film was certainly very helpful for us getting the film to Oprah Winfrey eventually. And
interestingly enough, this scene where she talks about how they wanted to start a theater program, within Freedom, a theater school within Freedom High School, as most people know, the following year was the economic crisis hit, and all of those plans went out the window. But, Jennifer and the other people that run these programs were able to find a way to keep their programs alive, even if that theater school didn't come to fruition.
I like where Vic sort of ironically talks about what these students can do for the rest of their lives. It was sort of a bittersweet moment.
Yes, and it's a great bridge to the kids sharing their own perceptions and where they're headed and what
as we say goodbye to them. You hear about their insecurities or their discoveries. And this, we made Katie and Allie sort of the button of the students because we really liked what they said. We loved the idea that being on stage gave them an identity.
And that is so much what it's about, because everybody knows about what it's like when we get to high school and we just feel like outsiders and are searching for a place to belong. And it really pulls it together.
That's the final laugh of the movie when Allie talks about marrying rich and going into theater. And so Shelley wraps the film up and sort of, I think, just encapsulates really what it's all about.
And also why the arts are important and what this is really about. It's about the next generation who is going to be responsible for taking care of everything sooner than we all know.
I just want to point out, if I can, if you look here to the left of the screen, you'll see Fred the Ghost pops up in that box off to the side there. He just fades out. And of course, it was how are we going to tell the audience that Vic passed away? And this was what we went with, and we thought it was simple and
poignant.
And audiences gasp
every time
because they weren't expecting it.
They're all rooting for him to beat it, and as we were, but it wasn't meant to be.
We thought, given that these are our most valuable players, that we wanted to give sort of a special final moment to the players in this film. Traditionally, in a documentary, you wouldn't sort of get a starring card like this. And so we used these photographs, most of them from Wilson Black, the official photographer of the Freddie Awards. And I love these. I love these, and the kids in action. It's terrific. This is such a beautiful picture, Katie.
And it kind of really reveals a piece of each of the characters in a way that, I think is meaningful.
A couple of these shots are actually pulled from the film, like Mark and Jennifer.
And this is classic Vic.
That is classic Vic. And so now we scroll through, and it's funny because we sort of screwed up on these credits a little bit, Matthew. If you look here as we continue to go, we have the cast and crew of Les Miserables, but you see that, but that's singular. The S was left off. So we misspelled the title of that musical
And I
2
can't tell
times.
you how many times we went through these credits before we posted them onto the film. But
proofread these things, and we don't know whose error it was. I guess, have to take the blame for it, but it's something that I felt the need to bring to the attention of the public.
I want to thank you guys for enjoying our film and listening in on a little bit of the behind-the-scenes commentary.
Yeah, if you're still awake, thank you very much, and please check out our website, www.mostvaluableplayersmovie.com, and you can find out what the cast is up to now. You can see lots of
deleted scenes and extras, and we even have a bunch of official merchandise. You can get our wonderful soundtrack by Roundy Miller. It's available for download, and we really think that you'll enjoy it even as separate listening. It's one of the prides and joys of the film for us. So.
Absolutely. So, thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.